Today in this video we are going to be getting into Targaryen Madness, and in my opinion Targaryen Madness is one of the most juiciest debates in A Song of Ice and Fire. Some people in the story and out here in the real world think it's basically propaganda. Others are convinced that if you're born a Targaryen you were just wired for crazy, and that's reason enough to wipe the whole bloodline out. So here's my take. Targaryen Madness is mental illness, plain and simple. It's just dressed up in a fancy name because of where it comes from, a nasty mix of ancestral blood magic and the crushing weight of sitting on the Iron Throne. So let's actually dig into this. I'm going through the 6 Targaryens' history as branded as mad, breaking down why I think their mental state ended up where it did and what that tells us about the bigger picture. First of all, we have Maegor the Cruel, the 3rd Targaryen king. This guy was quick to anger and even quicker to violence. He stole the crown from his own nephew, killed the kid himself from the back of Baelor the Black Dread. Wielding black fire, ruling through fear, beheading his own Grand Maester just for pushing back on his claim to the throne. But the real turning point, his trial against the faith of the Seven. They were in open revolt, so they called a trial of 7, and Maegor stepped up to fight in it himself. 13 of the 14 combatants died that day, and Maegor took a hit to the head so brutal it put him in a coma for 28 days, right on death's door. My theory, and I'm not alone here, is that Maegor actually died that day and blood magic is what brought him back. The whole time he was out, his mother Visenya never left his side, and Visenya was no gentle nurse. She was a battle-hardened woman with a well-known taste for dark magic. Honestly, given how much trouble Aegon had fathering kids and how little he and Visenya actually slept together, there's a real chance she used magic just to conceive Maegor in the first place. Then while he is comatose, she brings in Tiana of the Tower, another practitioner of the dark arts, to his bedside. When Maegor wakes up, he is a different man, worse in every way. This is when the real horrors start, killing his nephew, executing the Grand Maester, burning hundreds of the faithful alive, building the Red Keep and then murdering everyone who built it, torturing wife after wife. He dies impaled on the Iron Throne. Did he fall? Was he pushed? Nobody actually knows still. It is one of Westeros' great mysteries. So what actually happened to him? I think his mental illness layered with insane external pressure. He's a product of incest, which on its own raises real odds of something going wrong developmentally. Add in the possibility that his mother used dark magic while he was still in the womb, and you've already got a kid who probably wasn't born stable. Then he is raised under his mother's brutal hand, groomed for a violent kind of rule from birth, takes a near-fatal head injury, and gets yanked back from death using magic. But that's based on theory. Maegor wasn't just born evil, he was likely born with something already wrong, and everything that happened afterward turned him into a monster who, raised differently, might have been just fine. Next we have Baelor the Blessed. His madness is tangled up entirely with his faith in a lot of ways. Baelor was a genuinely good king, always pushing for peace over war, performing feats like walking barefoot to dawn, even draining the treasury to help his people. But his religious devotion tipped over into something darker by the end. Case in point, he locked his own 3 sisters in a tower, convinced their beauty was too tempting, mostly to himself. And like Maegor, there's a physical event that likely made things worse. While saving Prince Aemon from a pit of vipers, Baelor took a dozen or more bites. Viper venom has a reputation for messing with the mind, and it's after that his fanaticism visibly spikes, right around when he locks his sisters away. He eventually starves himself to death over 40 days trying to conquer his own lust, and that's the act history remembers him by. But honestly, I think a big chunk of the mad label comes from the nobility just not liking him. He wanted peace when they wanted revenge. He emptied their pockets for the poor, and he ignored the usual rules of succession. That makes you unpopular fast, and calling him mad was a convenient way to make sure nobody else got any ideas about ruling like he did. That said, yeah, by the end, he had genuinely lost a plot a little. Then there's Prince Rhaegel, brother to Maegor and Baelor, who shows up in the Knights of the Seven Kingdoms. Barely anything is known about him, though. The family clearly worked hard to keep it quiet. What we do know, he's gentle, but feeble, so much so that the people openly said he's better off dead. Rumour has it he'd wander the Red Keep naked from time to time. Whatever the specifics, this man was dealing with a real mental illness, full stop. And the fact that history slaps a mad label on someone who never hurt a soul tells you something important. When Westeros called a Targaryen mad, they are describing a mental state, not necessarily actions. Madness in this world is just the polite word for mentally ill. Now, there's a fascinating one. Aerion Brightflame, he's basically the perfect case study for Targaryen madness as inherited mental illness colliding head on with social pressure. In A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, he is an outright monster, kills Humphrey Hardy's horse because the dragon must always win, breaks Tansel Tootle's fingers for the same twisted reason. There's this one small moment where he stares at a dragon puppet, totally transfixed, and it tells you everything. His obsession with dragons goes way past admiration. Aerion genuinely believes he's a dragon in human form. Maester Aemon later tells Jon Snow that all his brothers were destroyed by dragon dreams, and think those dreams are the real trigger for a lot of Targaryen madness across the family. Aerion probably had vivid reoccurring dreams of flying and burning, so intense that waking life started to feel like a dream. Like he was still a dragon, just wearing a different shape for now. What makes it click though is that he tells Dunk near the end he wasn't always like this. What flipped the switch was House Targaryen itself, the crushing standard of being closer to gods than men. He was probably already carrying something inside him, and his environment dragged out the worst version of him. In the end, he does die drinking wildfire, convinced it will turn him into an actual dragon. That's the final proof. No sane person thinks wildfire is survivable. Aeron just couldn't perceive reality for what it actually was, and when you think about it, it's actually kind of sad. Which brings us to the most famous one of all, the Mad King. Now, out of everyone on this list, Aerys is the easiest to write off as just pure insane. Burning people alive for pleasure, cooking fathers alive in front of their sons, getting off on the screams, and his final act was trying to torch all the King's Landing. Hundreds of thousands of innocent people rather than lose the throne. But he was always a cruel man underneath it, and his madness just escalated as his life got worse. He lost children, which is a documented trigger for severe psychological spirals. Tywin Lannister, his own hand, was constantly angling for more power behind his back. Varys was in his ear feeding his paranoia non-stop, and then there's the 6 months he spent locked up, starved and tortured, which absolutely accelerated everything. Add in the fact that he's reportedly cut himself on the Iron Throne regularly, and you've got a man whose paranoia had nowhere to go but up. And a lot of the people in the realm did call him King Scab because how much he did cut himself on the Iron Throne. Some story as everyone else on this list, mental illness just given a scarier name, and like almost every case before him, it's the Iron Throne itself that seems to drag the worst people's version to the surface. We have one last one, and that's Viserys, Dany's brother and Aerys' son. Genuinely one of the most infuriating characters in the whole series. He assaults his own sister, and his hunger for power outweighs everything else in his life. But the rage didn't come from nowhere. It's the product of Targaryen supremacy, smashed together with genuinely traumatic childhood. Viserys got the worst possible combination. Old enough to remember when his family ruled everything. Old enough to remember his father. Old enough to be told that the throne might one day be his. But never once guided to understand how toxic that mindset actually is. Instead, he's thrown into exile, forced to sell his own mother's crown, forced to watch his back constantly, all while raising a baby sister on his own. He was made to be an adult while he was still a kid himself, and it left him bitter and resentful toward anyone with power over him. Living under ill-Roy's roof only fed their fantasy further, promising him a return home and a crown waiting for him. What we get by the time of Game of Thrones is desperate. Childish, cruel man climbing to any scrap of power he can grab just to feel like he's worth something. At the end of the day, every single one of these Mad Targaryens is genuinely unwon in some way, except maybe Rhaegel, but nearly all of them are also victims of a second kind of madness, the madness of power, the endless hunger for the Iron Throne, the paranoia of being one of the last of a dying chosen bloodline. Targaryen madness isn't just inherited mental illness, it's the Targaryen way of life itself. The crown poisons them at its core. The whole concept is George Martin's takedown of absolute power in Westeros and in our own world. Power corrupts even good men, and when it lands on someone already predisposed to cruelty, you get the Mad King, you get Maegor the Cruel. But even the Targaryen women cannot escape the madness label. We have Rhaenyra Targaryen. She is remembered by history as cruel, paranoid, and unstable during the Dance of the Dragons. While she certainly makes harsh decisions, the chronicles are written by biased male historians, leaving open the question of how much is fact versus political propaganda. We have Visenya Targaryen as well, the mother of Maegor the Cruel. She is often portrayed as cold, ruthless, and sinister, whereas the brother-husband, Aegon I Targaryen, is celebrated as a conqueror despite waging the same war. Then we have Helaena Targaryen. experiences profound psychological trauma after the death of her son. Her decline is treated as madness, though it can equally be understood as severe grief and depression. Martin also seems interested in how history is written. Fire and Blood is particularly emphasizes that accounts come from unreliable narrators with their own biases. Women who seek power are frequently described with language like hysterical, jealous, or mad, whereas men committing comparable acts are described as ambitious or warlike. This reflects medieval history biases, which Martin intentionally incorporates into the fictional histories. So while Targaryen madness is a real hereditary concern with the law, there is also a strong argument that Targaryen women are disproportionately characterized as mad because of gendered expectations and biased historians, and not solely because of their actual behaviour. That ambiguity is one of the central themes of Martin's portrayal of the dynasty. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and also comment below who your favourite Mad Targaryen is and why you think the Targaryens are mad.